Welcome to a new Daily Top AskReddit video. Today's topic.
Have you ever heard of a relationship that ended mainly because they had different political views? What happened? You don't have to agree on every single issue, but you have to share a similar worldview and set of values. I assume there are couples who can be together regardless, but I can't imagine my significant other would see the world in a completely different light than me. I agree. My parents do not. Mom's literally said, verbatim, Hitler had a good thing going. My stepfather is Jewish. He marched with MLK on Washington. I asked him once how in the fuck he is okay with a Trump-supporting, self-admitted and proud fascist. He says they just don't talk about it. Dude, what in the actual fuck? That's wild. What's your mom's view on your dad, lol? My mother's friend was always a vocal feminist and her husband was always quietly conservative, until his partner had to have an abortion for medical reasons. He brought her home the day after the procedure and he left to go to the shops and never came back, and left her a letter saying how he couldn't be with a murderer and he hoped she lives a long painful life and that she burns in hell for what she did to his child. He tried to reconcile after he finally let someone explain to him what a medical abortion was, and I believe she told him to fuck off and die. How awful. Imagine how bad you feel after having to go through such a procedure and then instead of your partner having your back you get this inhuman behavior. Good on your mother's friend for not taking that guy back. When one of my best friends was on the operating table, bleeding out from a miscarriage of twins, a doctor came out to speak to her husband. He explained that she was going to have a double abortion. Both of the girls had already died after she had developed twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome a few weeks prior. They already knew this was a risk, but they wanted children so desperately that they were hoping it would correct itself. Her husband goes back to sit down in the waiting room. The children they've been planning for years for are dead. His wife is bleeding out and it doesn't look good at the time. Last month, everything was perfect and we'd all helped set up the nursery. His mother is there with him, and without missing a beat after he explains to his parents what's happening, she says, abortion is murder, if you let them do that you'll both burn. This is because she got the vaccine. I hate that woman. Now imagine a whole country legislating to let you die instead of getting said simple procedure just because. Second-hand knowledge of a relationship between a Russian guy and a Romanian girl that ended after Russia invaded Ukraine. Dunno any details. Back a decade ago when Bashar al-Assad was gassing and bombing his own citizens, I knew a white American guy who was very right-leaning. That guy resented just about everyone, but he had finally found a guy to date that he was really excited about and had like a whirlwind romance with. The other guy was Syrian American. So they came over to a mutual friend's place and I watched right-wing guy spend night Middle East white American splaining to his new Middle Eastern boyfriend why atrocities that were happening were justified, while the new boyfriend got extremely emotional explaining he knew real people being killed and that the other didn't know what the fuck he was talking about. They didn't last long after. I'll never understand the kind of person that doubles down on very limited knowledge or misinformation on something they have no personal stakes in over people with actual experience and serious reasons to care. The kind of person that doubles down on very limited knowledge or misinformation on something they have no personal stakes in. Considering he's a gay or bi man who is right-wing, seems like he just doesn't give a shit about anyone, even if he does have a personal stake in it. I will never understand the complete lack of self-preservation and lack of common sense it must take to be both LGBT and conservative. Yeah, mine. This is a copy-paste from the past, so if something doesn't quite line up, that's why. First girlfriend was religious, I knew that going in. However, over 3 years we never really talked about religion or politics. It just didn't come up and we were more interested in each other than worrying about all that. Then, I guess sometime around 2016, Obama's name was brought up. Not even a judgment call, more of a, he exists, kind of thing. Well, she then gives me a, ugh, Obama. That terrorist. Excuse me, yeah, his middle name is Hussein, he's a terrorist. And then from then on we just could not have a conversation that didn't devolve into an argument. And so many of our arguments ended with her going, well, the Bible says, blank, so. Things finally came to a head when she started fishing around the idea of marriage. Now, we were arguing practically every convo, so obviously I wasn't feeling that. So it came down to me saying I wouldn't consider marriage until we lived together and she wouldn't consider living together unless we were married. At that impasse we decided to break it off. She then went off the alt-right deep end, so it was probably for the best. So now, I tend towards finding out someone's politics and religious beliefs way earlier than most say is normal. Oh well. For as terrible as dating apps have allegedly become, been out of the dating game for a long time, but met my wife through OkCupid, the ability to screen on religion, politics is a useful tool to have. Edit, spelling. Problem is that a lot of conservative men know they will not have a ton of matches, so they lie in their profiles and drop that little bomb later. Bait and switch isn't exactly better. There is no too early for religion and politics in dating these days. That info should be on every dating profile. There's just too much difference in worldviews to waste time dating someone that you could never see eye to eye with. My wife and I were on total different sides of religion and politics when we first started dating. I radicalized her with museums and science. When walking into one museum, I gestured like a dork while saying, "Welcome to my church, it has dinosaurs." What finally clicked for her, I think, was that I didn't shame her for questioning anything and actually wanted her to question everything. Yeah, I heard it through the wall. My neighbor was arguing with her husband about politics. I ended up walking out the door and saw her husband running out of the flat with a fork in his shoulder. He ran out of the entryway and was never seen again. That's crazy. That's forking crazy. Politics and religion are two things that I make sure we're in agreement on before even the first date. Saves everybody a lot of time and strife down the line. My ex and I were in the same place religiously, agnostic former fundamentalists questioning our indoctrination, and politically, fairly neutral. Boo, I was in those positions because I was 17 and hadn't had an opportunity to find where I fell, and he was in those positions because he was a 27-year white guy who wasn't really affected by anyone else's politics. Over a decade, I learned more information and became strongly atheist and politically progressive. He became openly racist, right-wing extremist, and believes in the convenient God that agrees with him on everything so he doesn't have to explain anything. His views probably also informed him that it was okay for a 27-year-old to pursue a relationship with a 17-year-old. I was 17, he was 27. Location flag, location flag, location flag, revolving light, police officer. I mean, the fact that you were 17 and he was 27 explains it all. Yikes. Number 3 for me was about wanting children. This is a big one. Met a gorgeous woman at my usual bar about a year ago. We instantly clicked, spent the whole night hanging out, and during the course of our conversation we found that she really wants kids, and I really do not. And that's a disagreement where there's no middle ground to compromise on. Till got a new friend out of it, so I count that night as a win. Yeah, I know a lot of people on Reddit act like politics aren't important, but for women, POC, LGBT+ community, our rights are on the line. Not even hypothetically. We already live in a world where women are dying from these policies. We already live in a world where little girls are being forced to keep their adult rapists' baby. We don't have the luxury and privilege of thinking it's just a douche versus a turd sandwich, it doesn't matter who wins, etc. He was moderate left agnostic, she was moderate right Christian. They disagreed on quite a few things, but they were always able to find a compromise that worked for them, and they were always willing to talk things over. Until COVID-19 happened, the lockdowns broke her brain, she started spending too much time on the crazy part of the internet and went hard right anti-vaxxer, but they agreed to let each other make their own medical decisions. Of course she was just telling him what he wanted to hear. It all came to a head one night when she tried to hide his wallet, along with his Medicare card, to prevent him getting his second dose of Pfizer. From what I heard, she's still unemployed, refusing to look for work, living with her parents again, and completely blames him for things falling apart. It is mind-boggling to me how many people in recent years destroyed their relationships and families because of online conspiracy theories. Like, I can't fathom how you can get so deep into internet stuff that being ostracized and alone is preferable to maybe admitting you were wrong. I saw something recently where someone said, everything looks like a conspiracy when you don't understand how things work. And that really struck me because all the people I've known that have bought into all kinds of conspiracy shit have not been the brightest bulbs on some level. It falls in line with the idea that most conspiracy theories make stupid people feel smart and knowledgeable, so that's why they get so invested in them. Even though none of it is provable fact, they don't care because it feels good to be right about something. The issue is that in essence, their information is usually far beneath the level of those dogshit daytime History Channel shows about mysteries and or cryptids and the like, where they present all this evidence as facts, given by experts, witnesses, but always, without fail, the last 2 to 5 minutes of the show is the narrator basically asking, is it true, real? And then saying, we may never know. The History Channel at least has the decency to acknowledge there is a possibility of what they just showed you is total bullshit, but I think that's more of an ass-covering move from the legal department than anything really. Conspiracy theorists rarely do that in my experience. Interesting that they managed to avoid this topic or find a compromise for a longer period of time, and that the relationship failed because of something that didn't even impact her at all. That's the thing with conservative Christians, the acceptance is usually an act. At some point you'll do something they don't like, that doesn't even affect them in the slightest, and the mask slips. My Bill went through this in his first marriage, now divorced. They got married in the summer of 2016, and then the election that year in the US was quite divisive and heated. They had different values in pretty much every way, but got engaged anyway because love and compromise can overcome anything. When the election rolled around, they agreed to just not talk about it, and it highlighted their many disconnects. When she went to the Women's March with her sisters and friends and their SOs and had to explain why he wasn't there, yet again, for a cause that she valued, that was probably the beginning of the end. Turns out, you cannot power through fundamental disconnects. Slightly different than the other ones here, but a friend of mine's parents divorced partially because of her dad cheating on her mom, but partially because of political differences. They were actually both conservative, just different kinds of conservative. He was an atheistic libertarian who wouldn't hire black people for his business because the statistics show they're more prone to crime, while she was a deeply religious evangelical Christian who thought fantasy was satanic and evolution was made up by scientists trying to undermine God. Even though they had overlapping political beliefs, like, they'd likely vote for the same person in a given election, he thought everything he believed was grounded in reality and facts and logic, and she believed hers were by divine mandate. I'm a leftist, but I could see a similar thing happening with, say, a tanky and an Antifa leftist. Even though your beliefs allegedly align, they're coming from different values. This sounds absolutely wild, and thank you for sharing that. Never heard of something like this before. I'm a leftist, but I could see a similar thing happening with, say, a tanky and an Antifa leftist. I know a left-leaning couple who broke up because of the October 7th terrorist attacks. One was a social democrat and the other was a leftist. He couldn't get over her arguing that it wasn't a terrorist attack. The difference between them and your extreme conservative example is that they wouldn't vote for the same candidate. She refuses to vote at all. Despite that, they still agreed on like 95% of stuff. Kinda surprising when it happened.